You're watching live from New Delhi. This is DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Sakal Bhattan. Coming up in the next hour. Millions cast vote in United Kingdom's snap general election. Pre-poll survey predicts landslide win for Labour Party. SCO Summit adopts Astana declaration, approve a 25 strategic document covering energy security, trade finance and information security. Two candidates, a reformist and an ultra-conservative, to face off in Iran's run-off presidential polls on Friday. Polls follows a special vote held after President Ibrahim Raisi's death in a helicopter crash in the month of May. And Team India holds victory parade in Mumbai. Fans throng Mumbai roads to support world champions to watch T20 World Cup trophy. The United Kingdom is holding its first July general elections in over 75 years on Thursday. Around 46 million voters are eligible to choose 650 lawmakers for the House of Commons, with results expected to be announced throughout the night and into the Friday. More details in our next report.
The United Kingdom is voting on Thursday to elect a new government. The ruling Conservative Party, currently led by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, is widely expected to lose power after 14 years. According to most opinion polls, Keir Starmer's Labour Party is set to unseat the Conservatives, scripting a landslide victory. Keir Starmer, leader of the main opposition Labour Party, is a former human rights lawyer and chief public prosecutor. He succeeded left-winger Jeremy Corbyn as leader in April of 2020. Supporters see him as a pragmatic, safe pair of hands, ideally suited to managing Britain back from economic decline. Currently, the biggest concern for voters is their deteriorating living standards, failing public services such as the NHS, rising immigration and housing shortages. The cost of living crisis, fueled by high inflation and slow economic growth, has made many Britons feel financially worse off. Immigration remains a contentious issue. Housing affordability, especially for younger voters, is another critical concern due to high property prices and rents. The Conservatives have been in power in the UK since 2010 under various prime ministers. Rishi Sunak is seeking his own mandate from the British public, having been installed as Conservative leader and therefore Prime Minister by his own MPs in October of 2022. He succeeded Liz Truss, who was ousted following just 49 days in power. The ex-financier has been credited with steadying government following the chaos of the Truss and Boris Johnson premierships and for halving inflation. He has failed, though, to meet several promises, including cutting health waiting lists, stopping irregular immigration and sending migrants to Rwanda. Experts believe that Nigel Farage and his Reform UK party are also amongst the key players in these elections, as he contests from Clacton-on-Sea to seal his first seat in Parliament. The Conservative Party promises tax cuts amounting to £17 billion annually, increased public health spending and a cap on immigration. They plan to boost defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030. While Labour focuses on wealth creation, encouraging investment and improving infrastructure through a 10-year strategy, they propose setting up a state-owned clean power company to enhance energy security, funded by a windfall tax on oil and gas giants. The results of the UK elections will start pouring in tonight and into Friday. All eyes are on who will be the next Prime Minister of the country. Nupur Praveen's report for DD India.
DD India's Stuart Summit joins us live from London. Hi Stuart, now the future of Rishi Sunak as Britain's Prime Minister clearly hangs in balance. What is the latest? Are there going to be any last minute surprises, or is it still a foregone conclusion that it's going to be an unprecedented history in the electoral history of UK when Conservatives will be out?
Well, after the last week, the polls did show a slight narrowing in the lead that Labour previously had. It was 20 percentage points ahead of the Conservatives. Just before polling ended earlier this week, pollsters were suggesting that lead has now decreased to 17 percentage points, with much of the gains going to smaller parties like the Liberal Democrats or the more right-wing Reform UK. Now, that could mean that there is a slight surprise on its way. It could mean Labour's majority isn't as large as expected, but pollsters do still believe a Labour government and a Labour majority, and a significant Labour majority, is the most likely outcome. What's really in question here are a couple of things. How much the Tory vote will be split by Reform UK, another right-wing party. Say there's a constituency that has largely Conservative voters, but if their vote is split between the Conservatives and Reform UK, then their vote could end up in that constituency going to Labour. The other thing that's questionable is to what extent turnout will end up causing headaches for both main parties, whether Conservative voters who would otherwise have voted decide to stay at home thinking the election's effectively lost, or if Labour voters get complacent and think the election is effectively already won.
Yeah, right. But what is the mood really like in the Labour camp? Like you mentioned about the low voter turnout, it seems to be a bit of a tricky situation where there is a sort of apprehension that the low voter turnout could sway the so-called predicted landslide win for Labour.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of caution in the Labour camp. Every time there were these polls suggesting a huge Labour majority, Keir Starmer, the potential future Prime Minister, but for now currently just the leader of the Labour Party, was eager to say that he is not resting on his laurels. He does not believe this is a one election, and even on the last day of campaigning, he was touring the length and breadth of Britain, from Wales to Scotland to Western England, to try to make sure not a single vote is lost. Labour has been burned before by election predictions and has notably in 2019 done the worst in its history for 85 years, a significant failure then. So Keir Starmer is not relaxing, and I expect while there's excitement in the Labour camp, there'll still be nervousness about what exactly is going to happen.
All right, so overall, the big picture, Stuart, we are really looking at a change of guard, outclassing more than a decade rule of Conservatives. What is your understanding? What really, if at all, there is a debacle of Conservatives, what could be the main reasons attributed to that?
For Keir Starmer, it'll be a question of trying to make sure that his majority is considered large enough that he can effectively impose and get through Parliament all the policies that he has promised in his manifesto. There could be some issues, for example, on the most controversial issues with some of his MPs rebelling. It's unlikely in a new government that would be a problem, but particularly for Gaza, Palestine and Israeli issues, the Labour Party has struggled to maintain cohesion throughout the election campaign, and that's something that could get worse. As to other foreign policy issues, Keir Starmer has largely sided with the Conservative Party when it comes to how the UK should approach Russia and Ukraine. Support for that is expected to continue with Keir Starmer off to the NATO Leaders Summit in just a few days if he does make it into power as Prime Minister. And another one that Keir Starmer is particularly interested in, according to the manifesto, is the India Free Trade Agreement. He has said that the Conservatives have underdelivered and overpromised on that one. He says the Labour Party would attempt to get through that deal, which has taken over 2 years to negotiate and seems stuck at the 14th round of negotiations.
Well, it's just a matter of hours now, perhaps, when the picture will be more clear. Thank you very much as of now, Stuart Smith, for joining us live from London. Pleasure talking to you. And now shifting focus from UK elections to SCO updates, where India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar delivered a speech on behalf of Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi at the SCO Summit in the Kazakhstan capital of Astana. India has pointed to mutual respect for territorial integrity, non-interference in internal affairs and no use of force being the basis for the foreign policies of the 9 members of the bloc without naming anyone. DD India correspondent Akshay Dogre gets us more.
Leaders attending the 24th meeting of the Council of Heads of State of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization posed for a group photo at the Palace of Independence in Astana, capital of Kazakhstan. Chinese President Xi Jinping, Russian President Vladimir Putin, Kazakhstan President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, and leaders from other member countries participated in an in-depth exchange of views to deepen cooperation across the board under the evolving geopolitical landscape, to address major international and regional issues of the day, and plan for the future development of the SCO. From the Indian side, the External Affairs Minister who led the delegation delivered Prime Minister Narendra Modi's remarks at the SCO Summit, which called for finding common ground to mitigate the consequences of ongoing conflicts and tensions, respect for sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity of nations, a united fight against terrorism, isolation and exposure of those countries that harbor terrorists, provide safe havens and condone terrorism, joint efforts against climate change.
Our central thrust was that the primary purpose of SCO, the original purpose, was to combat terrorism and combat extremism. We therefore got an endorsement today very explicitly combating terrorism, all forms and manifestations, including cross-border terrorism, terror financing, harboring terrorists. So if you look actually at the whole terrorism paragraph, it is much, much stronger than anything which the SCO has said before.
Dr. S. Jaishankar also held several bilateral meetings with his counterparts from Russia, China, Tajikistan, Belarus and others, where the leaders discussed the matters of mutual interest. Meanwhile, after 2 days of discussions and deliberations, the leaders adopted a Astana document which called for a range of steps for growth, security, prosperity of SCO member states. These steps included a comprehensive reform of the United Nations to strengthen its authority, strict adherence to the nuclear non-proliferation regime, strict prohibition of the development and production of biological and toxic weapons, outer space to be free from weapons. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, with its steady expansion over the past several years, has become a multinational forum of true global importance. However, how the member states alleviate each other's concern, work towards resolving differences and work towards each other's mutual benefit will actually be a determining factors of the true success of the SCO. In New Delhi, with camera person Alok Gupta, Akshay Dongre, DD India.
In other news, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will pay an official visit to the Russian and Austria from July 8 to 10th of this month. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be in Moscow on 8th and 9th of July at the invitation of the Russian President Vladimir Putin to hold the 22nd India-Russia Annual Summit. The leaders will review the entire range of multifaceted relations between the two countries and also exchange views on contemporary regional and global issues of mutual interest. Prime Minister will also travel to Austria from July 9th to 10th. This will be the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Austria in 41 years. Prime Minister Modi will call on Austrian President Alexander von der Bellen and hold talks with Chancellor of Austria Karl Nehammer. Prime Minister and Chancellor will also address business leaders from India and Austria. Prime Minister Modi will also interact with members of the Indian community in Moscow as well as in Vienna. President Joe Biden conceded in a radio interview that he performed poorly in his presidential debate against Donald Trump, admitting, and I quote, "I screwed up," unquote. When asked if this debate performance was a cause for concern, Biden downplayed it, attributing it to a single bad day.
Well, look, two things. One, I had a bad night. And the fact of the matter is that, I screwed up. I made a mistake. But I learned from my father, when you get knocked down, just get back up. Get back up. And, we're going to win this election. We're going to just beat Donald Trump like we did in 2020. We're going to beat him again. But we need all of you to get this done, all of you.
Still to come on DD India News Hour, coming up next. Macron takes a step back from public view reportedly while final push by parties ahead of Sunday showdown. Putin declares Russia is not in a position to declare a ceasefire in Ukraine. And Canadian citizen of Pakistani origin Tahawur Rana faces extradition for 2008 attack.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt. And now let's move on to some more news and updates, talking about France elections, where France is preparing for a potentially volatile polls day on 7th of July, with 30,000 police officers set to be deployed nationwide to maintain law and order. This comes after reports of attacks on two political candidates during the campaign. The election will decide if Marine Le Pen's party, the National Party, will get a majority and lead the next government in France, a key European economy. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has withdrawn from public view and is not seen in public for almost 2 weeks amid reports that he's been advised to stay quiet ahead of Sunday's second round of voting. More than 210 candidates stood down on Tuesday in a bid to try and block the far right, post which the polls suggest that Marine Le Pen's National Party will not win a majority of seats. And before the withdrawals, pollsters had calculated the first round putting the run on track for 250 to 300 seats. Thousands of demonstrations in Paris opposing Marine Le Pen's far-right National Party, citing concerns about its national preference and anti-migrant policies. The second round of voting will take place on July 7th. My colleague from DD India, Ross Collin, joins us live from London. To begin with, Ross, hi. More than 200 candidates reportedly are now in a bid trying to block the far right's so-called win, which was predicted earlier, from winning a majority of seats. Though it seems that the situation has changed a bit as a run-up to the final day.
Well, I'm here in Paris, the French capital, ahead of the decisive second round of votes, which will be on Sunday. And we know that there have been these withdrawals by more than 200 candidates from different parties, deliberately stepping aside so that the support against the far right can coalesce around just one candidate. That is the strategy that the centre, the governments and also the left-wing coalition have come up with, a loose agreement to work together for one day only on Sunday to try to block as many far-right candidates from winning those seats as possible. For their part, the National Rally, led by Jordan Bardella, the 28-year-old prospective Prime Minister, have said that they believe there is no other option but an outright absolute majority for them. They are still determined to win the election outright on Sunday, and they do believe, and the polls point to their party at least being the biggest voting bloc in Parliament.
But this whole news of French President Macron withdrawing from the public view on the advice of his advisors, is it part of a drawn strategy?
Well, there's certainly a strategy that has been, in terms of an advice for President Macron, to potentially just dial down and reduce the number of public appearances, because there is certainly a very strong feeling by many people in many of the different parties, millions of people across the country who do not like the president. Despite the fact he won the presidential election just 2 years ago, there is a big swelling of support against the president. And so the government do feel if he could potentially reduce the number of appearances that he makes, that could be helpful to their campaign. I'll also just point out one thing that's come out in the last couple of minutes.
Sure.
A message from the French football captain Kylian Mbappe. He has said that it's truly urgent right now, more than ever before. You have to vote. We cannot leave the country in the hands of these people. We have seen the results and it's catastrophic.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Having said that, it seems to be one of the most volatile elections that France must have ever seen. This massive deployment on the roads. Could you just bring us to speed with that aspect as well?
Well, there's certainly the worry that there could be tensions, concerns over possible unrest on the Monday following the election, on this coming Monday, the 8th of July, potentially. They are going to be deploying lots of police officers to try to quell any unrest, which would very likely be the left and the centre demonstrating against this possible far-right victory, which could occur. At the very least, they're likely to get the biggest number of seats, but they may fall short of a majority. Marine Le Pen has said that her party leader, Jordan Bardella, would not take up the post of Prime Minister if her party does not get a majority. And there's also these discussions that have been taking place, these calculations between the left and the centre about a possible so-called grand coalition. Now, we do see this regularly in countries like Germany, very rarely, though, in France, where different parties come together to try to especially keep one party they all agree on their dislike of, to keep that party out of power, the far right. But there's no doubt that the National Rally are now the premier political force in France.
It's going to be a lot of tension as a run-up to Sunday, and we'll have to see how really Sunday pans out and what would be the fresh headlines in France. Thank you very much from joining us from Paris, Ross. Thank you. And from one election to the other, shifting focus to Iran, where the candidates for the Iran's presidential polls have made their last efforts to sway the public for votes through election campaigns. And these elections follow the death of President Ibrahim Raisi in helicopter crash. Masoud Pezeshkian, a former reformist candidate, and Saeed Jalili, I beg your pardon, an ultra-conservative contender, have emerged as the possible frontrunners. This report tells you more.
Iran is passing through a very critical phase in its checkered history. The presidential election in Iran is turning out to be quite interesting. The Guardian Council had approved the names of 4 candidates. In the first stage, no candidate could get the required 50% votes. In such a situation, it became necessary to conduct a runoff poll that will be held on 5th of this month. In this phase, there will be a contest between the top 2 candidates. Reformist lawmaker Masoud Pezeshkian and ultra-conservative former nuclear negotiator Saeed Jalili have emerged as the 2 candidates. Let's now tell you what happened in the first round. The snap election was held on 28th June. The 3 conservatives and a single reformist candidate vied for the country's top elected seat, after dozens of other candidates were barred from standing by the powerful 12-member Guardian Council, which is tasked with overseeing elections and legislation and reports directly to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. During the first round, Pezeshkian led with 42.5% of the votes, followed by Jalili with 38.6%, according to the state news agency IRNA. Out of 60 million eligible voters, 24 million cast their ballots, resulting in a 40% turnout. The record low turnout in a country where presidential elections usually command more than 60% came despite Khamenei urging Iranians to show maximum participation in order to strengthen the Islamic Republic against its adversaries. Both candidates, Saeed Jalili and Masoud Pezeshkian, held their final campaign rallies on Wednesday, succeeding the first round vote.
All of them want to impose sanctions on our nation so that we don't reach the nuclear energy, so that we don't reach the missile industry. But despite this, our country is reaching both nuclear and missile industries and moving on the edge of science.
People must be allowed to express themselves. We must allow that. I have said this repeatedly that the nation is not led with one certain person, group or a faction.
The run-off presidential election will take place on Friday, 5th July, with a reformist and conservative hardliner facing off to replace Ibrahim Raisi amid unprecedented voter apathy. Bureau Report, DD India.
President Vladimir Putin has stated that Russia will not consider a ceasefire in Ukraine unless Kyiv meets Moscow's demands, which include abandoning its NATO aspirations and ceding control of 4 provinces. Ukraine has previously rejected these demands as unacceptable. Putin also dismissed the idea of appealing to Ukraine's parliament to negotiate an end to the conflict. Meanwhile, both sides
We
reported...
simply cannot go ahead and declare a ceasefire now in the hope that the other side will take some positive steps. This is number one. Secondly, we cannot allow the enemy to take advantage of the ceasefire to improve its position, rearm itself, boost its army through forced mobilization and be prepared to continue the armed conflict. We need to ensure that the other side agrees to take steps that are irreversible and acceptable to the Russian Federation, and therefore a ceasefire without reaching this agreement is impossible.
Meanwhile, both sides reported military victories, with Russia destroying a Ukrainian fighter jet and Ukraine shooting down most of the Russian drones used in a recent attack. A Canadian citizen of Pakistani origin is facing extradition to India for his alleged involvement in the 2008 Mumbai terror attack. U.S. attorney told the court that Tahawoor Rana, who is sought by India, is extraditable under the provisions of a U.S.-India treaty. Benji Hire reports from Washington, D.C.
Well, this was an argument made during the closing statement before a US court where Mr. Rana has been appealing. The case put forward against him was that he is extraditable from the United States to India under this treaty that exists between the two countries, and that India has established probable cause to prosecute him for his role in the Mumbai terrorist attack that resulted in 166 deaths. Mr. Rana, who is currently in a Los Angeles jail, is associated with David Coleman Headley. He's one of the main conspirators behind that devastating and fatal 60-hour siege across India's most populated city, orchestrated by members of a militant Islamist organisation from Pakistan. Now, Rana was actually acquitted by a separate US court of charges directly abetting those attacks, but he was convicted of other terror charges in 2011. The 63-year-old's lawyer says he should not be extradited to a foreign country, India included, citing insufficient credible evidence. Benji Hire in Washington, reporting for DD India.
Defence Minister of India Rajnath Singh held his first foreign conversation since the new government took charge. He spoke with Australia's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence Richard Marley. The two sides reviewed a range of issues pertaining to defence cooperation and discussed closer collaboration between India and Australia in the Indo-Pacific. India places great value on comprehensive strategic partnership with Australia. Now let's take a look at the other stories making news around the world. The European Union will impose tariffs of up to 37% from Friday on imports of electric vehicles made in China. However, there is a 4-month window during which the tariffs are only provincial, and intensive talks are expected to continue between the two sides. On Peruka Lake in Croatian brothers Martin and Valent Sinkovic are preparing for the Paris Olympics. They are hoping to get their 4th medal for rowing. Vale and Martin won a silver medal in London in 2012 in the quad and a gold medal at Rio Olympics and another gold in Tokyo. Brazil's humpback whale population, which migrates from Antarctica to reproduce, was nearly driven to extinction by hunting. However, the international hunting ban has led the recovery of the humpback whale population, creating new opportunities for the tourism and new challenges for the conservation. Cambodia held a blessing ceremony on Thursday for 14 looted antiquities returned from New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art. The artifacts arrived on 3rd of July. This is the most significant return from New York's museum since 2013, when two 10th century statues were sent back. And still to come on DD India News Hour. Coming up next, United Kingdom votes to elect a new government. The big question, will Labour outclass Conservatives? We'll have a guest to discuss the fate of the UK government. Who's going to be the next Prime Minister? We'll talk about that. Plus, Israel weighs Hamas's response to Gaza ceasefire proposal. That's our next story on the other side.
Welcome to Jaipur.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and before we move on, let's do a quick recap of the headlines we are tracking at this hour. Millions cast vote in United Kingdom snap elections. A pre-poll survey predicts landslide win for Labour Party. SCO Summit adopts Astana decleration, approves 25 strategic documents covering energy, security, trade, finance and information security. Two candidates, reformist and an ultra-conservative, to face off in Iran's run-off presidential polls on Friday. Poll follows special vote held after President Raisi's death in a helicopter crash in May. We're joined by Burzeen Wagmer from the SOAS University in London, and he's also the visiting fellow with Royal United Services Institute in London, joining us to talk about who is going to be the next Prime Minister of Britain. Thank you very much, Burzeen, for joining us. So there's been this one main narrative since Conservative Prime Minister Mr. Sunak, called for these general elections, which surprised many because many would ask why now and why not later in the year. But the way things have panned out in the last 1 month or so, the predictions, the narratives, it's going to be endgame for Conservatives. What is your thought, and do you think there could be any last moment surprises?
Well, if elections are anything to go by recently, not just in India or Iran, Sakal, then could be surprises overnight. But as I speak, as it's 5 in the afternoon here, polls will close at 10 p.m. British Standard Time, and some things can be portended as such, namely that Labour is, according to all polls, including the latest YouGov poll, on course for victory, which would be a historic for any single party since 1832. And consequently, the Conservatives will be routed as never before since their founding in 1834. The poll in question I referred to suggests that Labour might pull off a 212-seat majority in the House of Commons, our lower chamber, of 650 seats. Two historic firsts could take place, Sakal, and unless I stand corrected overnight, which could happen.
Okay.
In the first general election since Her Late Majesty's passing, this is the first post-Elizabethan election that we have.
Okay.
It must be pointed out that Prime Minister Sunak has called for this snap poll, and a snap poll has never ever been called with the running party's opinion ratings 20 points behind.
Okay.
It has never occurred as such, but Prime Minister Sunak decided to do so as he did on 22nd May. And secondly, if also, if things look dismal for the Prime Minister, indeed they are, as private circles maintain, he may become the first sitting leader to lose his seat in his own Yorkshire constituency, where he won in 2019 with a 63% majority, 27,000 plus votes. So those are the two firsts one could portend. I would hazard that.
Okay.
But then the question is, why was the election called and such a hasty 6-week campaign, which has not gone well at all for the Tories, come to think of it. You could say the Prime Minister claims, as he has always been claiming, that inflation has come down to 2%, which is all very well. Perhaps he could have sat it out through autumn, which he could, mind you, and waited for interest rates and borrowing costs to come down, and perhaps that could have tilted it slightly in his favor. But then those are just counterfactuals.
But the question here is that what was the hurry? Did he miscalculate his the benefits of his policy? We do know that he's not even managed to complete 2 years in power, and many are surprised. Contrary to the expectations, these polls could have waited till next year, and now I'm sure he's not a happy man, because he's going to create history in a way which he or conservatives wouldn't ideally want, right?
And nobody would have envisaged it. You're quite right to dilate upon that. One wonders why, for the life of it, Mr. Sunak decided to call this snap poll, and he has, for all purposes and intents, wrong-footed his party. Make no mistake. That is given as a fact, and most Tories are not even standing for Parliament again and are heading for the hills, as some have put it so. And the question is, it was a very busy summer. You've had a NATO meeting, you've had a D-Day 80th anniversary celebrations, where Mr. Sunak was quite frankly disgraceful in his hasty departure.
Okay.
Then you've had the European football tournaments. So it was and Wimbledon is coming up. So you have had a eventful summer. Why did he have to distract the voters and call it now? He could have done so later. But for all purposes and intents, he has done so. And I'm sure he regrets it immensely.
Okay. And there are also some smaller parties vying to win the seats in the 650-member House. Are they of any consequence? What are the fate of these smaller parties? How do you look at it?
Yes, that is an important question to point out. If tomorrow, the morning after, if a Labour is in ascendant, it will be a high-taxing party with an immense drive towards left-wing woke policies and socialism. Untrammeled socialism is what would happen. And the centre-right assortment of parties would be lucky if they can even muster 10% of seats on the floor of the lower chamber. That is something to note, because we are looking at a triumphant Labour. And what checks and balances could you expect in Parliament with a party which comes in with a thumping majority, and a party which has some very questionable policies put forward? Although Sir Keir Starmer has run a maddeningly cautious agenda and campaign, we know what is in store, because Labour has not come clean with the electorate. High taxes are expected, massive taxes even in the first budget on wealth, immigration and property, a relentless drive towards net zero with eye-watering costs, and this obsession with decarbonisation. There will be also culturally speaking, socialist woke policies, with Sir Keir and the Labour turning a blind eye to illegal immigration, which is already completely out of control and has been out of control by both Conservatives and the Labour over the last 2 decades, make no mistake. And that is something to watch out for. But again, I come back to if Labour is in ascendant, Sakal, the centre-right parties, none of them would have a seat on select House committee meetings. It will be a completely one party in charge, with the Lib Dems, if they come into opposition, as something of a very limp opposition at best. And basically between the Labour and Lib Dem, you have just shades of left and left-centre thinking. There will be nothing left for the Conservative or for free market policies and thinking left on the British political landscape.
Okay, so that comes to the question that if it is almost certain that Starmer will receive the reins of power, now the other question is it going to be a coalition government or an absolute majority? Will he manage to do so?
That question has been put out in certain quarters. If tomorrow morning I stand corrected after all what I've said here and we have a hung parliament, that remains to be seen too. I would be the first to concede I'm wrong in advance, if so, but yes, you are quite right that in certain quarters this has been mooted. It could be a hung parliament. And of course, the Lib Dems would have nothing to do with the Conservatives as they did with former Prime Minister and current Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron, when they did go into a coalition, if you remember, back then, almost 2 decades ago. But they have decided they would have nothing, they would hold no truck with the Tories at all. And perhaps there could be some talk of if it were to come about, but then it may seem likely that it may not.
Okay, one last question before I leave you to monitor the poll results, because we're going to talk with you tomorrow as well, I'm sure.
And it's an all-nighter, as you can imagine.
Yes, it is an all-night, and we are on DD India, we're also watching these election results very keenly. Burzeen, but overall, how do you look at the most uncertain phase of UK government polity in the last 5 years or so, including Sunak's departure, if at all that happens? I mean, I'm still not jumping the gun till the time it's actually official.
Yeah, you're quite right to mention that. As I pointed out, that in private conversations, one is given to understand that the Prime Minister may be bracing for a defeat, as I mentioned, in his Yorkshire constituency. And there is a talk that if it were to come to pass, Tory High Command would still ask Mr. Sunak to hold the reins for a brief while. It is implicitly assumed that the loser would stand down, as happens after every election. But the 1922 committee may just about ask Mr. Sunak to hold fort for a brief while, because there is talk that Mr. Sunak, if he loses, could return to the world of finance or even California, where he does have a summer home. But in all probability, he would return to banking and finance if it were to fall through for him.
Okay. Burzeen Wagma, it was such a pleasure talking to you as always. Thank you very much for joining us on this broadcast. We, of course, will be in touch with you to actually decode the results finally. Thank you as of now for joining us from London. And now let's take a look at other stories making news. India's Jharkhand Mukti Morcha Party Executive President Hemant Soren took oath as the Chief Minister of the state for the 3rd time. On Thursday, he was administered the oath of office by the Governor C.P. Radhakrishnan at the Raj Bhavan in Ranchi city. He was unanimously elected by the leaders of the JJM-led alliance, that is Jharkhand Mukti Morcha-led alliance in Jharkhand, as a legislative party leader. 6 people have been arrested in stampede incident at a religious event in Uttar Pradesh's Hathras. Aligarh Inspector General of Police Shalabh Mathur said on Thursday that around $1,200 reward has been announced on the arrest of the main accused in the case. The death toll stands at 121 and all bodies have been identified. Andhra Pradesh State Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu on Thursday met Prime Minister Narendra Modi and several Union Cabinet Ministers in Delhi. Naidu sought central financial assistance based on promises made in the Andhra Pradesh Reorganisation Act in 2014. Israel has dispatched a delegation to negotiate a hostage release deal with Hamas. As per the government official on Thursday, as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has prepared to convene his security cabinet to discuss new Hamas positions on an accord. Before the cabinet meets on Thursday evening, Netanyahu will have consultations with his ceasefire negotiations team. Israel received Hamas's response on Wednesday to a proposal made public at the end of the May by Biden that would include the release of about 120 hostages held in Gaza and a ceasefire in the Palestinian enclave. And still to come on DD India News Hour. Coming up next, we will get up close and personal with an artificial intelligence robot in Scotland. Hurricane Beryl rambles towards the Cayman Islands and Mexico. Millions gather to watch T20 World Cup Trophy Victory Parade in Mumbai of India.
Voice of a rising aspirational world. stories of challenges, struggles and accomplishment. A world battling conflict, hunger and poverty. Embracing growth, development, science and technology. A voice of progress, a voice of unity. Watch Voice of the Global South with me, Akshay Dongre, only on DD India.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked, we just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt. The Global India AI Summit 2024 concluded in New Delhi on Thursday, with India reiterating its commitment to advance responsible artificial intelligence development. As the lead chair of the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence, India hosted 28 member countries and AI experts, industry leaders, academia and other stakeholders to work towards promoting safe, secure and trustworthy artificial intelligence ecosystem. DD India's Amritpal Singh reports.
Meeting the rising infrastructure requirements of artificial intelligence arena and increasing AI readiness are some of the biggest issues faced by the developing countries intent on leveraging sophisticated AI technologies to fast-track the realization of their growth and development aspirations. This formed the core of the discussions on Day 2 of the Global India AI Summit that concluded in New Delhi on Thursday. The conference also explored strategies to support and bolster the growth of AI startups.
While the government's approach is to build an inclusive AI infrastructure mirroring the successful adoption and development of DPI or digital public infrastructure, the need of the hour is to foster a climate of innovation that could come about by partnering with startups and entrepreneurs.
We need a single roof where all the researchers, the developers, the startups like us can connect together, share value and provide value and make policies around it so that we can go on the ground, such like the developers like us, and build the solution which real India need.
It's really good to see the government taking the initiative, right from building the digital public infrastructure to providing, coming up with the digital data protection bill.
Inclusive nature of AI that would bring the transformation into the society, that is a larger aspect of it.
This is a platform where we meet fellow entrepreneurs in government and corporates and academia, so which helps us identify the complementary platform, complementary solutions.
With the aim of fostering greater global cooperation, a closer integration of the global partnership of artificial intelligence with the OECD could help shape the future of AI for safe, secure and a beneficial AI ecosystem. Amritpal Singh for DD India.
And staying with AI from India, moving on to Scotland, where kids are getting a unique opportunity to interact with Ameka, an advanced humanoid robot, as part of an initiative to introduce them to the latest robotic technology and make it more accessible. The humanoid robot is equipped with features like facial recognition and cameras and is designed to interact naturally with humans.
In Chinese, you can say 很高兴见到你, HNG. So here to foster deeper connections, share unique. Looks like you've drawn a picture of a red apple on a blueberry.
Hurricane Beryl has advanced over the Cayman Islands in Mexico on Thursday following its assault on Jamaica with fierce winds and heavy rainfall, resulting in floods and power outages. Over the past few days, the storm had already carved a devastating path through smaller Caribbean islands. Earlier, Hurricane Beryl churned menacingly over Jamaica on Wednesday afternoon, uprooting trees, ripping off roofs and destroying farms. Mexico's defense ministry says that the Army, the Air Force, the National Guard and activated emergency response protocols in the Quintana Roo region. Hurricane Beryl continues its fear across the Caribbean, churning towards the Cayman Islands and the Mexico after slamming Jamaica on Wednesday night. At least 10 people have been killed across the region. The storm has weakened slightly down to Category 3, but still has sustained winds of 120 miles per hour or nearly 200 kilometers per hour. Tony Waterman has the latest from Texas, where the storm is headed.
Beryl was pounding the Cayman Islands on Thursday, bringing strong winds, storm surges, and damaging waves. The U.S. National Hurricane Center is expecting up to 15 centimeters of rain to fall, and this comes after the storm dumped more than a month's worth of rain on Jamaica. The island's capital, Kingston, receiving double the amount of rain it normally would in July in just the span of 24 hours. At least 2 people are known to have died on the island, including a 26-year-old who was swept away by floodwaters and also a woman who died when a tree fell on her home. Hundreds of thousands of people in Jamaica right now remain without power, making it difficult to know the real extent of the damage or if that death toll is even higher. The storm is now on a collision course with Mexico before spilling into the Gulf, where it could hit parts of South Texas over the weekend. Even the possibility of the center of the storm tracking over us here in central Texas, although meteorologists expect it to be significantly weakened by then. But Beryl has certainly left a trail of destruction across the Caribbean since it formed last week. It is the earliest Category 5 hurricane to ever develop in the Atlantic. Also, it's a storm that has strengthened at a record pace from a weak tropical depression to a full-blown powerhouse hurricane in less than 2 days. And scientists say record high water temperatures due to climate change is the main culprit here, something that won't be changing in the coming months, teeing up this hurricane season to potentially be one of the most destructive and active in a very long time. Tony Waterman in Austin, Texas, reporting for DD India.
The flood situation in the northeastern Indian state of Assam has worsened with 8 more deaths reported. The death toll in the state has risen to 46, while in Manipur, most of the Imphal River has crossed the danger level. In Bihar, several rivers are flowing above the danger level. Besides, waterlogging was seen in several cities in the country due to heavy downpour.
The flood situation in Indian state of Assam worsened on Thursday. The water levels of several rivers, including the Brahmaputra, are flowing above the danger level in the state. A total of 2,800 villages in 29 districts are currently underwater. Some of the affected districts are Dhubri, Lakhimpur, Dibrugarh, Kachar, Nagaon, Morigaon and Nalbari. More than 1.625 million people in the state have been affected by the floods, while 39,451 hectares of agricultural land have been inundated. The death toll from floods in the state has risen to 46. There are currently 25,744 people sheltered in 515 flood camps.
There are certain people, who hasn't come to relief camps, but they are near their residences in a highland. So we are providing them tarpaulins and reliefs so that they can also stay there. And again, we are providing food for the cattle, fodder for the cattle also.
More than 110 animals have drowned in Golaghat and Majuli so far. At Kaziranga National Park, the flood situation is still grim, as 173 forest camps of the parks are still underwater. Forest Department have rescued 65 wild animals. In northeastern state of Manipur, Aral River floods has worsened the situation in Senapati district. Paddy fields were inundated by flooding river water in Senapati district. Manipur's Water Resources and Relief and Disaster Management Minister said that most of the Imphal River has crossed the danger level. In Bihar, several rivers including Kosi, Bagmati and Mahananda are flowing above the danger level. Due to heavy rains, water is accumulating at many places and normal life is completely disrupted. The Bihar government has put officials of the Gandak barrage on high alert and dams are being continuously monitored. Besides floods, Heavy rains in several parts of the country led to waterlogging in many cities in the country. In Gujarat, heavy rains lashed Danta Taluka of Banaskantha on Thursday. Waterlogging was seen at several places, including a civil hospital in Danta. While in Jaipur, in Indian state of Rajasthan, major roads across the city were waterlogged following heavy rains. In Haryana, heavy rain led to waterlogging in several parts of Ambala. With inputs from Subina Roy in Assam, Fuzail Ahmed reporting for DD India.
The T20 World Cup winning Indian cricket team was given a rousing, a resounding welcome as they landed in India on Thursday via specially arranged charter flight 5 days after winning the coveted title in Barbados. And upon arrival, the team met Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, in Delhi and had an open-top bus parade in Mumbai or a victory lap. Take a look.
World Cup champions Team India were given a rousing welcome after they landed in India amidst thunderous applause and chants of India, India. The victory procession in an open bus carrying the Indian cricket team was held from the National Centre for Performing Arts at Nariman Point till Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai. Massive sea of excited fans and people from around Mumbai took over the streets and covered every inch of Marine Drive. The victory parade was organised by BCCI days after Rohit Sharma led Team India to win the ICC T20 International World Cup 2024, ending 11-year-long drought of an ICC title. Departing from Barbados after Hurricane Beryl, Rohit Sharma's team, India, touched down in New Delhi on Thursday. Led by Captain Rohit Sharma, the team was greeted by a sea of ecstatic fans and a flurry of media personnel at the New Delhi airport. Fans waved the national flag, held up banners and cheered for their heroes who had brought the coveted trophy back to the nation. The Indian cricket team then met Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at his residence at Lok Kalyan Marg in New Delhi. Prime Minister Modi congratulated the T20 World Cup winning team during the hour-long meeting, where the cricket team players were seen sharing a laugh as they were reminiscing the World Cup campaign. India's triumph has not only ended 11-year drought for an ICC trophy, but also ignited the passion of cricket fans across the country. As celebrations continue throughout India, one thing is clear: the 2024 T20 World Cup victory will be remembered as a defining moment in Indian cricket history. Sports Desk, DD India.
Well, passions and emotions always run high when it comes to cricket, and that too lifting a coveted World Cup trophy in a country like India, where cricket is, many would say, next to religion. And on that note, it's time to wrap up this edition of DD India News Hour, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.